this is where I start believing more and more in the power of intuition. And so when there is something inside that says, yes, go there, is this kind of pull or like curiosity. And that's been the case in a lot of these opportunities, right? So I think there's always been this drive for me to continuously develop myself. And once I feel like I've mastered something, I do it for a while, it's fun, but then I get bored. I don't want to get all spiritual here, but it's like there's so much love out there and we should try to add value and help others. And all that started becoming a bigger part of me. A coach helps you clarify by looking at your body language, by helping you out. And I thought, oh my God, I want to do that. I want to help people get clarity so that they can be happier.
Ginnette, good morning and welcome to the Job to Journey podcast.
Good morning, Peter. Thank you. And good morning to you.
So you're here because one of the themes of this podcast is Job to Journey, where we talk to people who've left their corporate life and embarked on a journey of self-discovery and self-employment and taken up a new way of approaching their life and their work and to some extent their personal circumstances. So and you took on that journey, what, 4.5 years ago?
Yeah, actually in 2021 officially, and it wasn't really planned. I was part of a limited restructuring, and this was during COVID time. Do you want me to go a little bit into it now?
Well, actually, I thought about you a little bit, and I drew a Venn diagram of people who were born in Colombia, spent their teenage years in America or US, and then live in Norway now. And the Venn diagram shows a very, very small populations. I think in your case, actually, I think a chronological view of your path, because I think my reflection is everything leads to today in your particular circumstances. So yeah, let's get to that, those trigger moments 4 or 5 years ago. But let's maybe take to that beginning. Are you Colombian? You're born in Colombia and then you moved to US when you're 12 years old and you spend your formative teenage years in a US high school.
That's how it was. So I grew up in Colombia. I was a bit of a tomboy growing up, adventurous. I remember watching Saved by the Bell at the time and being very curious about, how is it to go to school with the lockers and all of that? And then suddenly, some years later, my mom remarried and we moved to the US. He first moved to Colombia. It didn't work out. He thought it was better to go to the US, my stepfather. And so we moved when I was about 11. I turned 12 relatively quickly and started on the 7th grade. So that was a bit exciting because I remember seeing that on TV and what it's like to have the life, but it was also really difficult for a child with the new language and adapting and so on. But I think I've been curious, and there's this curiosity that has driven me in a way on that path. So at that time, I was not thinking career at all. That was just this big change in my life and a whole new world of opportunities opened up.
And you mentioned that actually this sort of threw you into the fact that you were, for the first time in your life, different, right? And you know, you were probably expecting this nice warm welcome. We've all watched US programs as a kid, and then high school's a bit more like cliques and fitting in. And how did you find that experience, and how did you adapt to that?
Yeah, that was tough. I mean, now reflecting back as a child, I remember it was a bit scary because I thought it would be a lot different. And then suddenly you can't express yourself in the same way. And then there's some kids that may say dumb things. Like I remember once out in the playground, this kid said, go back to your country. And that was the first time that I think I encountered a little bit of this discrimination, if you want to call it that way. And it was really strange because I'm like, why does he say that? And then I grew up in Florida, and there's a lot of Hispanics.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of, a bit of you hang out with the Hispanics or you hang out with the white people. They call it that. I mean, I'm part of my friend, but there is a little bit of this segregation. And I thought it was a bit strange because I didn't identify with this group or that group. I had very, very tasty music. I had very, very tasty interest. And so I felt like I don't really fit in this whole box and I don't fit in that box. So it was a little strange to feel that you kind of had a bit in common with everyone, but you were not really part of one specific group. So I grew up a bit with that feeling of like, I don't fit in here, I don't fit in there, but I have a little bit in common with everyone.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm lucky enough to have been to Colombia a couple of times, and you've got this beautiful, I mean, amazingly beautiful country and beautiful people, but obviously you've got a perception from the outside that doesn't align to what it's like living there on a day-to-day basis. And I suppose
That's true.
coping with that at high school is something,
Yeah.
you need to navigate through. But you then, you mentioned to me that actually you managed to leverage that, because we won't go through your whole high school experience, but as you start looking towards your career and your next steps, university, you actually decided to leverage that Hispanic connection and join various societies and clubs, et cetera, et cetera. And maybe that was sort of your first example of networking, right? You didn't think of it as networking then, but maybe that's just that early networking approach, which had its own dividends.
Yeah, it did. And that was actually something that wasn't taught to me. My parents also, my stepdad lived there. My mom came and she didn't teach me about networking or career or anything. So a lot of this I had to find out on my own.
Yeah.
And I did it through observation. And I joined these groups more because I was curious and they had events and there was activities. But then once I was in there, I realized, for example, in the Society of Hispanic Engineers that I mentioned, they often were the ones in contact with the recruiters because they were making the events to ensure that they recruited this kind of.
Yeah.
I never really had to apply for a job in the traditional way. It was more like I just talked to people, and then suddenly they knew of a position, and then oh, I'm interested, and then that became an interview, and so it was a very for me it was very like I was thinking about this earlier. If I would have had my CV in a pile, would I have gotten chosen, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But instead, because of networking and giving them a chance to get to know me this way, I kind of cut off that first step and went right into the interviews and got the jobs. So that was that in a way, I think was also how my interest in sales developed, because I realized that it's much more about relationships than it is about checking the ticks on the box. And I'm really happy I got that to experience that early in my career.
No, I think, when I look at the kids of today, I mean, this was, obviously a few years ago from your perspective, and still that networking, and things are so competitive, things are so tough. I mean, for the kids graduating today, differentiating yourself, showing yourself a bit different when, A plus is the baseline. I mean, it's such a valuable skill, and it's so important for your career and your life ahead.
Yeah.
But skipping on away from school, now maybe you could just get the order correct. You work for GE Healthcare, you end up on a trip to Paris, and somehow you end up in Norway. So maybe you could distill that a bit more succinctly than I just did into a little bit of a journey for us.
Yeah. Yeah, so after my internships at GE Healthcare, I ended up getting a job before I graduated, which was actually very nice as well, because then you go your senior year not thinking about it. So I studied abroad in Paris. I've always been curious about Europe. I had done a study abroad program a summer in Spain, in Salamanca, and I fell in love with the pace of life, and it was something different. I felt like my heart was like, I think that I fit in more here. At
Yeah.
least that was the feeling at the time. So I ended up going to Paris to study abroad. And while I was there, I met someone just randomly. And it was a Norwegian guy. And it was, my friends call it love at first sight. It was actually, it felt like that. And it was a lot of coincidences. So I think also life is full of coincidences. And I've been following a lot of these coincidences. And I've ended up places that I never thought I would, but I've enjoyed them quite a lot. So with him is he was going back to the US for vacation on the day that I was finishing my program. So we got a chance in a way to continue, and
Oh,
he got to
okay.
meet my family and everything. So it just timing was great. But of course, you can't have a long distance relationship or at least it becomes very expensive. And I was not rich. He's not rich.
Yeah.
So we had to make some decisions. And I think that is something also about making a decision and just going with it and not looking back.
Yeah.
And that's a bit of what I did at the time. But he moved first to the US because I was very certain that I didn't want to lose this opportunity that I worked with my career and so on. And he already had a job. He was a bit older than me. So it was easier for him to just say, let me try the adventure. So he moved first with me, and then we lived in the US for 2 years. And that was my first job. And he managed to also get a job, which was great, that we got married.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it would have been more
Yeah.
complicated. So this worked out. And then after about a year together, we decided to really get married. So we got married first just for logistics. And then the second time around, it was a wedding. And yeah, and that's how I ended up with a Norwegian. But then the Norwegian kept talking about how much better it was in Norway when it came to work and so on. And I thought, yeah, it sounds interesting. And here we have our first cultural clash. when Latin Americans say yes, it means kind of yes, maybe.
Yeah.
So he said, "Oh, how about one day we move to Norway?" And I was like, "Yes, maybe." Or I said yes, but I meant more like, "Yeah, we can look into it." And 2 weeks later, he comes, "I have a job I have
Oh,
to accept by
wow.
this date. Are we going to move?" And suddenly I'm there. Okay, do I just stay on the safe or do I decide? So it was a bit of a quick moment. And I think I've gotten enough experience to see what it would be like. I worked in New York at the time. It was actually quite hectic. And for a 20-year-old, it was it was a good training. Let's just call
Right.
it that way. But then it did actually appeal to me to have a more balanced life, what he was describing with the longer vacation and all of these things that Americans think is impossible to have. It feels like a dream. So I said yes. And then 2 months later, we moved to Norway and I had no idea what I was going to do, but I was very glad I had some experience. So I somehow knew that it would turn out okay.
So I sense a little pattern here, Ginnette. You're quite at one level comfortable with the uncomfortable. You mean obviously your parents decide you're moving to US. It's not your
Yeah.
decision, but you join a company, you leverage your training, and then yeah, okay, I'll go to Norway. You seem to be comfortable with making decisions and then seeing what the consequences or the opportunity that those decisions result in.
Yeah, and not always, right? But it's been this key moment in life where it just felt right. And I think this is where I start believing more and more in the power of intuition. And so when there is something inside that says, yes, go there, is this kind of pull or
Yeah.
like curiosity. And that's been the case in a lot of these opportunities, right? I actually consider myself a bit shy and self-conscious. English is not my first language. Norwegian is not my first language. But when I feel that pull and that force and that curiosity, it's almost like I forget myself and then I just go with it. And it's always turned out into something better on the other side. It's like I forget myself. It's all those beliefs, all those things stay on the side and it's very enjoyable. It's like a state of flow. I don't know if you can call it that.
Yeah.
So this decision was an intuition based. It felt right. It was just like, let's do it. Of course, afterwards, you have to deal with the thoughts and the scare and the fears and all of that. But you get used to dealing with that. And most of the time, it's just learning to let the head just
Yeah. Yeah.
going on.
You go and get Six Sigma trained. So again, you seem to have this passion for learning and trying new things. And then post that, you end up at Cisco for a considerable period of time. This is probably, let's say, the central part of your corporate life.
Yeah.
Maybe give the viewers a view of what that was like and what drove you during that proportion of your career.
Yeah. So I ended up in Cisco because when I recently moved, it was more like I took the first job that I had and then I got to develop my career a little bit there. Then I had a baby and I realized, okay, it's not going to go anywhere here. There's nothing else. So I think there's always been this drive for me to continuously develop myself. And once I feel like I've mastered something, I do it for a while. It's fun, but then I get bored.
Yeah.
And then I want more. And I don't know. It's like, I don't know if it's good or bad. Sometimes it's a little frustrating because it would be much easier if I just wanted to stay in one thing. But it was this that led me to look for different opportunities. And I started work at this company without speaking the language. I've always wanted to do sales, but I felt like I had to rely on my engineering background since I didn't master the language, and I felt that was important for sales. So I did jobs more with like quality and Six Sigma, and that was my door into Cisco. So I actually started working in Tamberg, but then they were bought by Cisco at the time in the video, and they had a position for quality, a product quality engineer. So that's how I got into that. But what was interesting is that I learned a very theoretical way of doing production and manufacturing. I'm an industrial engineer. And here I actually got to experience it live because there is real manufacturing and you look at products. So that was very exciting to actually get a chance to explore that other side because my first job was sales. So I never got to see how the company run. And I think that gave me a bit of a broader understanding of how Cisco worked and the different BUs and the what's behind the product. So that was a lot of fun and very interesting. And that was my first job in Norwegian. I did the interview in Norwegian. I got the job in Norwegian. I was exhausted every afternoon after having, trying to understand. And then during lunchtime, that was the worst. People talking about
Yeah.
racism, what they're doing. And it's like not even during lunch, I got a break because my brain was just trying to translate and, live with this. But I thrive into that. It's like I enjoy learning, I enjoy mastering, I enjoy feeling like I got something. But after a while, it got a little, yeah, It wasn't giving me that anymore. I figured it out. I knew how to do it. I was doing well. But then I felt very curious towards sales. And I was trying to figure out, is this similar to what I did in the US? And in my head, I'm trying to, it was just this curiosity, right? That has led me to just talk to people and not worry about what, it hasn't been a plan behind it. It's been more like this curiosity that has driven me. And so I remember asking the top sales, like sales manager at Cisco, what was it like to be in sales? And then we had a great conversation about it, and he suggested that I apply. And here also comes a bit of the coincidences with life, because it's not always that this happens, and a bit of an intuition as well. So there was a role that was open. I talked to the manager about it, but that one I didn't feel it was a fit. And here come that intuition part. And then I said no. And I think they were a bit shocked that I said no. And so he calls me and asks me, why did you say no? And I said, well, it doesn't seem like it's what I was thinking about. And then there was another role as a partner account manager. So I got to talk to the partner account manager,
Yeah.
Cisco at the time, which is a different kind of role. It's more business development, growing, and it just sounded very interesting. And so I ended up getting that role and starting my journey in sales at Cisco through partners. And that was very exciting. I mean, it's a completely different world to work in quality and sales. And there's a lot more people engagement. Then we go back to the networking and being curious about people. And that's, I think, what has been so giving in the 10 years with Cisco, and also technology. I love technology. So it was this curiosity. I don't think I thought so much. It was more just enjoying what I was doing and solving problems and meeting people and building relationships.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting, Ginnette, whether you're self-employed or work for a corporation. I mean, what you've just described there is newness, learning, change, excitement, and obviously, when a corporate role or a corporation or an organization is providing that to you, it's great, right?
Yeah,
And
exactly.
even in that partner role, as you and I both know, that got even more exciting because it was the whole hardware to software journey. So
Yes.
having taken that role, you then had to almost relearn that role, and we all had to go out and start talking to partners and customers in a different way. So, there was even change within a role, not just between
Yeah.
role in terms of evolution.
Yeah. And I think that's why I managed to be so long in a corporate career in a company like Cisco, because I got this opportunity of trying different things, learning different things, meeting different people. And I mean, I grew a lot in that role, in all the roles in there. I got such a different perspective. I realized there were new things that I didn't know anything about. And then I got curious about. I suddenly understood a bit more why it's important to understand business. So now, in this time off, or in my own journey, I've actually gotten an MBA, and it adds such a depth of understanding. And I think I really enjoy that. I enjoy learning. I enjoy seeing how the pieces come together, and what can be the possible outcomes. So it was a great giving career at the time. But then when I got the last role, then COVID hit, and I was supposed to travel and work more one-on-one with partners, and it was a completely different dynamic at the time.
Yes. So, and I think you've been kind enough to mention that you've got COVID coming along, but even before that, you told me before we met today that actually there was this growing sense that everything looks okay. If I write it down all on paper, what am I missing? But there was this growing sensation internally that actually I am missing something. And you kind of wanted to find out what it was, even if you didn't know what it was. Maybe you
Yeah.
could talk a little bit about how that growing sensation manifested
Yeah.
itself and what you chose to try and do about it.
Yeah. So during this period, I think it had been so exciting and so much growing and so much doing, right? But it came to a point where, okay, you kind of start figuring out things slow down. And then one more, right? And at the time, something very personal happened, or that affected me personally. A colleague that was a friend died. And it also started making me question, like, okay, what is this about life? And I remember it got me reflecting a lot. It was a really sad experience, but I think it was a bit of those moments where you stop a little and you're like, okay, what is life about? And so I got to start being more curious about the human experience, what is purpose, like, because up to now, my career has been just, I go after the fun and the excitement and the learning, but what else is there, right? And this, I did a lot of reading, and then I started meeting people that started seeing this whole concept of we are part of one and we want to contribute. And there is so much I don't want to get all spiritual here, but it's like there's so much love out there, and we should try to add value and help others. And all that started becoming a bigger part of me, and I started feeling a connection towards that. And so that had already been there. And then, obviously there's corporate. The fun is still there, but you start seeing that it's a lot about numbers, it's a lot about this, about that. So it's, I got to a point where it's like, okay, I need to make a decision. I'm not getting the same alignment. I'm not getting the same value from what's happening here. But at the same time, it was COVID. We do have to think about economics. That's very important. I've also gotten a divorce at the time. So suddenly I still have to worry about money.
Yeah.
Now I have to pay for my kids and all of these things. So it was a bit like, but what happened with the pack? I got a package. It wasn't me that wanted to leave. It was a restructuring due to COVID. And then I got this package, which allowed me then to think about the next step and how do I then start shaping more what I want to do as opposed to just jumping on what the opportunity comes up. So it was a period of a lot of reflection and trying to find out, how do I get more meaning? How do I work with people in a deeper level?
Yeah, and I think that's interesting, that point, Ginnette, because if something, that someone close to you dies and you get a chance to reflect, and, sometimes we all say to ourselves, well, if I was ill tomorrow, how would I spend my life? So at one level, one can start thinking like that. But if you're on that day, your reality is a leaking roof, a child who's off home sick, and a set of tasks that you find really frustrating at work, you can't just sweep it aside and say, oh, in the grand scheme of things, I'm still alive, I'm healthy, aren't I lucky? Your brain doesn't work like that, right? So you have to you have to navigate, well, what has to be different? You can't just say, I'm going to live every day like it's my last. I mean, that's just not a reality, is it?
Yeah, you can, but I do think it'll catch up with you.
Yeah, well, possibly. That's possibly true.
So I think, and I've realized this more and more about myself, even though I take risks, I always take calculated risks, right? I don't think I've never, this whole thing, drop everything and go, has never really appealed to me. I think it's important to test a little. And I think maybe this is where my engineering mind comes in. It's like, okay, is it really how they're telling you? Because I think often we get torn by an emotion, and this is wonderful and fun, but you do need to stop a little and think, okay, is it just a momentary thing, or is it something that is the right direction? And yeah, we all want to believe that it's just to do it and everything will fix itself, but it's not. It is important with a plan. It is important with some kind of security, and everybody has a different level of that, right? So I think I became very aware of what my level of security was. And then I think once you're open and it's easier to see the opportunities, but then you take the opportunities from a place of intention and it's a bit more calculated than to just do it. And I'm not saying there's nothing wrong with the other way of doing it. This is just the way that's worked for me. And I think if I don't want to tell what people should be doing, but I think it has helped at least to maintain some safety. It's not just me, right? If it was just me, it would be different. But I do have kids. I do have responsibilities. So I think at one point you have to see where you are, right?
Yeah.
If you're young, have nothing to lose, go for it. But at one point, as you get older and older, you start having more responsibilities and you start having things that you have to be there. So I do believe that freedom and choices come with a great deal of responsibility. And I think often people just want freedom, but they're not really aware that the responsibility comes, they're together.
Yeah, I feel we're building to this crescendo of when you go for it on your own, Ginnette. But there's one more little avenue I wanted to explore with you, and I think it's okay to get a little bit spiritual. But you mentioned you've got this engineering background, very logical, but also I think at some point you decided to rekindle or grow your artistic side. So maybe you could just share a little bit about how you then chose to presumably deliberately look beyond the logical and start trying to build some more spiritual or artistic components into your life again.
Yeah. So I've always been interested in drawing and painting and so on, but it was always from a very practical point of view, right? It's like I need to decorate that wall, and I am a bit artistic and creative, so I would just paint something. And then I thought, oh, it would be nice to study art, but the logical part of me was always like, well, what are statistically speaking, what are the chances that I will be able to have the lifestyle I want with that? And they were quite low. And so I decided to postpone it and just have it as a hobby or wait until I retired to study art. But then what happened was during one of those times when there was less happening and I started questioning a bit, I got a little down. And I mean, I don't want to say officially depressed, but it was like I started also wondering what's the meaning of it all, hence the journey. And I decided to study art. It was in my head, it just came like, why do I have to wait until I retired to enjoy something that I really like? And that was also life changing. That opened up my view in so many ways, because art is not just about making something pretty or painting. It's about learning to see things from different perspectives. And I think that has helped me both at work and at life, and not just to paint and make nice things, but to learn to appreciate art as a way of looking at the world in different ways through different lenses. You know, when you look at a piece of art, you first have your own impression, like what does it tell you about yourself? And then when you find out what the painter was trying to express, is like, what does it tell you about the painter? And then what do other people see in it? So I think this is where this whole movement towards being more interested in people and the brain and how we think and the world started with the art. And it also became a way for me to disconnect, because I'm also very active. I want to do a lot of things and action and this. And you know, my body doesn't always keep up with my head. And so I would get tired and so on. So this was a way to, you know, put a little bit of a closet and paint, and I would lose myself in the painting and be able to get a proper break from thinking.
Well, I mean, I think it's so nice that you've found the time, and you've got kids as well, so you've got to carve out that time. It doesn't just naturally happen. You've got to make time for it.
But that being said, even though it didn't work out romantically with my ex-husband, he's been a great partner and a supporter. So I think it was in a way possible because of the support I had with him at the time. And we set it up so that we will be able to have a balanced life. Not only that also, but Norway is a very work-life balance place to be at, right? So you have the vacations, people respect the off hours. So I think also the environment allowed me to have that space to take those breaks and do that. So I feel very fortunate that that was the case.
Well, you just triggered a thought in me in that Ginnette saying that is actually, of course, you haven't had the benefit of a network of either US or Colombian-based relatives to sort of, you know, create that big family. That's just not been an option for you. So I'm sure it's so important that you and your ex-partner have been able to, you know, navigate that in a very collaborative and fruitful way.
Yeah, and his family was great. But the ironic thing, though, is that we ended up getting divorced. And so, and this was at the time I decided to also go on my own, right? So it actually went from like having this support to like, oh, I'm jumping off here and I have like no support network. So that has also been, yeah, it's been tough, but it's been very giving. I feel like it's taught me a lot. It's taught me how to be self-reliant. It's taught me how to also expand my network and get more help and meet other people and speak up. And I have great friends. I think when we move to different countries, it's like your friends become a bit like your family.
Yeah.
And I've been very lucky that I have a group of friends that have helped, that I know I can go to if I really need, even though you don't want to bother them. Sometimes they have their own lives, their own kids, their own things. But it's just kind of knowing that there's someone there that helps a lot.
So we've reached that point where it's COVID. You've got your redundancy package from Cisco, and you're building this kind of sort of more spiritual and holistic way of looking at your life. And I suppose at that point you've got a decision to make. Am I going to go look for that next corporate job, or am I going to think about forging my own path? So maybe you could tell us a little bit, Ginnette, about, you know, where you started, at least the thinking process before you ended up where you are today.
So I think, I don't know if I can speak for everyone, but at least during COVID, because we were so much inside and at home, there was so much time for reflection. And at the time I started meditating and reading a lot of books. And yeah, and I kind of started getting this growing feeling of, okay, I want something more. Like it was a natural pause to, instead of just going on autopilot, go after the new shiny thing, think a little bit through, what do I want now for the rest of my life? And it sounds very big, right? It's very intimidating. But I knew that, okay, I'm kind of done with corporate. I started feeling that it doesn't give me the energy anymore. I felt like maybe in order to keep going up, I would have to make certain trade-offs that I didn't want to make, or at least that was the impression I had at the time. You know, it's like the further up you get, it's more about politics and different things. And it just didn't appeal to me anymore. And so I felt like I still want to move forward and go up, but I'm not sure that I'll be able to do it there. even though I'm very thankful for the career that I had and what it was, but it's just the next steps did not appeal to me at all. And so I was thinking I could maybe go back and start from scratch in a different product, different company, different thing. But it was something was kind of missing. And then I didn't really know what, right? And I feel often when you sign up to a job, there's this expectation that you're gonna be there forever or for a very long time. And there was something about me thinking, oh, I don't want this. I don't know if it. I don't want to marry a job right now. So I felt like I just wanted to date around with a bit funny parallel with where I was in life also privately. So maybe it was a time where I was more ready to explore and figure out what I really wanted. And I think that influenced my decision quite a lot at the time. And I remember I also spoke with my manager at the time. And I don't know if he sensed that I had an entrepreneurial spirit in me or what, but he kind of suggested, he said, don't rush. And
Yeah.
maybe he said it actually like, see if you're entrepreneur, you have entrepreneur spirit, see what else can come up. And that kind of rang a bell to me. And I thought, okay, yeah, why not? So then I started thinking about starting on your own and finding out the details and how it's done. And of course, it helped that I had a bit of cash saved up because it gave me that time to be able to think through. And not only that, but during COVID, I think it was also very apparent that we don't need as many things as we think we need.
Right.
And there was a lot of expenses that, it was just mindless spending, shopping that didn't give me anything. And I had already started thinking about this. I met someone that challenged us for a year not to buy anything, like clothes, like just the basics, right? And I actually did that challenge. And afterwards, it's like there is something about this addiction, not addictions, but behaviors that we just do and do, but we don't go away from them long enough to stop them. And I remember going out with friends and they're shopping, and I'm like, no, I don't need anything. So it was this kind of shift at the time. And then I realized that, yeah, making that large amount is not as important anymore. And now I know what my basic numbers is. What is it that I like, the minimum I need to make me feel that safety? Of course, if I have more, I'm super happy. I'm not going to complain. But it kind of helped to know that, because then suddenly you see that you're covered for a certain amount of time. And when you have that safety in place, it's easier to play and explore and be curious.
Yeah. No, I
So
think COVID did bring that sort of, to many people, not to all, obviously, that sense of what do material things mean. And you made me smile, because I got to admit, sometimes I mean, not to talk about mortality, but sometimes I buy a jacket and I think, how many more jackets do I need ever in my life?
Exactly.
And I tend to buy a sweater. I've got a pile of sweaters in my wardrobe, 15 high, and then I'll buy one in October and wear it to the end of March, and I've not touched the other 14 that are in my wardrobe.
And even worse in COVID, right? Because we dress for others in a way,
Yeah.
or some do, right? And then you're at home all day. And it's like, okay, so, you may be wearing the same thing a couple of days, nobody notices, or you change the top. Or like, okay, this person didn't see me today, so I can have that same sweater I wore with the other meeting. So it is a little funny how we think about these things, but at the end, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
Like, you think people noticing, maybe they're not, maybe they do, but then they forget, and it doesn't matter. So at the end, it's like, what gives you joy, right? And I connected a lot with that, of the objects that I have, that I invest in, that I buy, are things that give me joy. And I started getting rid of the excess. Having that mindset a little bit before I made this decision made the transition a little bit easier, because then I didn't have to deal with, oh, how am I going to pay for all these things, or how am I going to keep the same lifestyle? So it was a little bit like a reset. And that allowed me then to be where I am right now, which is exploring, because I'm not going to say that I have it all figured out. I'm still in a process.
No, I mean, I don't want to turn this into a Color Me Beautiful session, but I totally agree with you, because there'd be some days when you're at home for a week and you think, as you say, I bought this yesterday, maybe I can get away with it. And then another day, well, like, I'm going to iron a shirt and wear a shirt today for me, and I want to wear that today for my own peace of mind, or how I feel I want to look. But as I say, before we digress too much into which is also interesting, clothing. But so as you're thinking about, you definitely don't want to go back to corporate, and you've got an engineering background, you're Six Sigma trained, you did a lot of sales training at Cisco, for example. But you probably don't want to make that the kernel of your self-employed business. Is that fair to say? And maybe you'd like to describe how you sort of try to create that. What's Ginnette going to promote herself with and lead with from a self-employment perspective?
So I think for me, it was all first about, do I even manage this at the beginning? And then once I saw that with the skill set that I got, I was able to actually, through my network again, get a couple of gigs, or well, they were more like projects. So it was like project work during a certain amount of time, and you get paid quite well because you are taking the risk as a company, as yourself, right? So you get paid maybe a bit more than you would per hour, but then it's not something that necessarily comes constant, right? But that allowed me to grow the buffer even longer. And then after a couple of them, I decided, okay, now I need to make a decision. Do I continue working this way where I just go and find these gigs, these projects, and do that? Or do I really want to build something? And that's when it was at the same time, parallel with this, I've been learning more about coaching, and because I wanted to find something to be able to contribute to others and maybe start providing advice in a different way. And I fell in love with coaching. It's a great way to help people clarify, and it's what I needed myself at the time. And I think often that's where it is. You get something and then you want to share it with the world. So I think coaching helped me start making these decisions, get direction, realize that, okay, this is all nice. I will maybe get paid and do the work, but I want to do something that's more meaningful. And I clarified that with that. And then I thought coaching could be a vehicle to help others get to that point and have happier lives, right? Because we've been told that it should be this one way or this other way. But as I found out through my journey, it's like, no, it's what I enjoy buying is different than other people enjoy buying. We don't need to measure ourselves by how much we're making, but more about, can we make the experience we want? And sometimes you can stay in the same job and do whatever, make a couple of changes in other areas, but we never sit down to think structured and figure out what is it really that's giving me that feeling of uneasiness,
Yeah.
right? And this is what a coach does. A coach helps you clarify by looking at your body language, by helping you out. And I thought, oh my God, I want to do that. I want to help people get clarity so that they can be happier. They can find a way to either change or not change, because sometimes the change doesn't have to be so drastic. It can just be the perspective, the way that you see things, or the way that you've been feeling about things. And during sessions in coaching, you get a chance to clarify this and work together and help the person get clarity so that they get unstuck. And so and that's how I moved into that. So now I'm building my coaching practice and I'm trying to help people of this. But of course, coaching is so broad.
Yeah.
So it's really difficult. And that's always the question I get. What kind of coaching do you do? And I'm like, what do you mean? And so
What
hence,
coaching do you need?
and I saw you had someone that coach golf, right? And it is a lot of the same principles, but they're applied in a different area. And so that's where I am right now. I'm trying to figure out, how do I get to people, right? What's going to be the area that I focus on? And it's where I am right now. So it's in the process of figuring out what target I'm going to go for. And I have a lot of things that I'm exploring right now. But during the time that I was in my other jobs, I joined an incubator program. Because I wanted to do this concept to make coaching available for everybody and at a lower level. And because so many people are graduating, but people don't know what coaching is. But as I was going through that program, I realized, okay, this is a lot of work for just one person. And so I have awesome ideas. I have a sketch. And if I wanted to do it at the degree I wanted to do it, I would have to start getting funding and doing a completely different thing that maybe will come in the future. But I realized during the incubator that it wasn't for me. And so I took a bit of a step back, and now I'm more trying to, how do I build myself as a coach? Which niche am I going for? I'm in that explorer, like a concept.
Yeah.
I'm doing concept development right now with myself and giving myself the space and the time to do that. And then maybe later on, once I'm established there and things get a little bit better, I can go back and pursue that other idea.
So it's interesting, Ginnette, because it seems to me that you could have had self-doubt about your coaching ability, but because you'd invested the time during COVID, the increasing reflections on what you felt was important to life and the art side of things, do you think that gave you the confidence to say, actually, my opinion or my coaching is valid? Or did you still have a little bit more of, why is anyone listening to me, that you had to build into your...
Yeah, I had to build it. It didn't come natural. I think it's a process, and it's a process. We think processes are linear and go up,
Yeah.
but processes are a bit more like
Yeah.
all over the place. So I think for me, it wasn't at the beginning, but I think because I've been doing I did the coaching, like a year and a half of coaching training. And during that time, I got to develop confidence by having clients and talking to them. And what really showed me that this is something I really enjoyed that I could do is the results. Like, people were so thankful. And I got a lot of feedback that this worked. And they were very surprised that, oh, I thought it would be longer to get rid of this, but like within one session, they would clarify and then just move on. Not everybody, right? But I had a couple of those. I had enough of those to believe that this is something worth pursuing and that I want to help more people instead of, it's just see the results, and it's so giving. It's
Yeah.
not just to see someone kind of get rid of a thought that has been limiting them and then be kind of surprised, like, was that it? Like, oh my God, I've been suffering with that for like 10 years. And just one session where you just did an exercise or got them to see it from another perspective, because that's what it is. They have the answer within themselves. But just that little reframing that they managed to do during that session, because they stop and they take the time, because it's often more that than anything else, is just so giving. And I'm in love with that. And I think that's why whatever this ends up being, it's going to be something always with people, helping them do the reframe.
Yeah, and you know, I think we're publicly putting on record, you know, things that people do, whether you change your clothes, how often you change your clothes working from home. But the other thing that I think is a hidden secret that I found out that you and I share is I saw this thing on Instagram, and it was a Tony Robbins 3-day event, and I'm like, oh, come on, he's very personable, but there's a certain sort of love him or hate him vibe. And I said to my wife, this thing, it's Pacific time, but it turns out to be 7 till 10, 3 nights in a row. And it was like about becoming an entrepreneur. And of course it's free until you spend $30 on the extra PDF that's going to help you. And then there's the $20 a month if you choose to do it. So, but actually, it was really good, and we both enjoyed it. And this is a long way of saying, you mentioned to me that you went on an NLP course with Tony Robbins, and it was good. You enjoyed it, and you learned something from it.
I really enjoyed it. I think because I'm in this journey of trying to figure out, what market I'm going to go to, how I'm going to approach this more from a business perspective. I've been doing a lot of observing and following up other coaches. And so in a way, I was modeling a bit and trying to observe and see what is it that makes him so special, because he draws a lot of people and a lot of attention. And I've heard about his books before. I've seen them, but it's been a bit on the side. Yeah. And then it was exactly the same, right? It's the emails. And they catch you. So I'm here looking in parallel, like, oh my God, this works. But a part of me is also analyzing, like, I thought that all those little emails were so annoying and all these kind of things, because there's all these tactics. Yeah, it's just marketing tactics, right?
It is marketing.
Yeah. And so part of me was so like against it, because I don't like that. I have a kind of like a resistance towards it. But at the same time, I'm like, oh, this marketing tactics, I don't want to fall for it. I don't want to fall for it. And then I just I totally fell for it. But at the end, when he delivered the product and the event and the energy and all the people, it was like, your product does add value.
Yeah.
And I think this was my takeaway from the whole thing. It's, don't be embarrassed to do the marketing thing. It may feel a little fake. It may feel a little weird. But if you have something of value to add, it doesn't matter how they got there. And I think that's the key, right? If it would have been the same and I fell for it and it would have been horrible or giving me zero value, I would have been so upset. And then it would have just been like, I don't believe any of that anymore. I don't want to do more. So I think it was a bit 2 lessons into one. First, it was the marketing, how they do it. And okay, what can I use of that for my own business development? But the guy he has his own approach. And I think that's also part of it. NLP can be used in many different ways. We all have to bring our personal touch to the way we help our clients. And then the clients that vibrate with us or that match with us are gonna seek us, right? So it was a great experience, and I really enjoyed it. He makes good points, and I think learning is always good. You can listen to a lot of perspectives, and you take what you want, and you leave what you don't want.
Yeah, and I think that's how, from a coaching perspective, did you spend the $1 on the extra PDF? Did you spend $30 on the, the full course summary, or did you spend $100 a month for the foreseeable future because it gave you access? That's up to you, right? Just from a coaching perspective, do you want 1 session? Do you want 5 sessions? Do you want me to be around on a retainer? But that's almost the customer has to tell you, or you need to navigate through with the customer what you think is the right input or the right level of investment they should make.
And that's key with coaching, because it doesn't work if the person doesn't want to change.
Yeah.
If the person it's not there in their process, then you can't help them move along. You can't, because then it's pushing, right? And then it's manipulating. So it's very important that the person is at the right place. And you may need a little bit like a, hey, like a nudge, but a nudge is very different than forcing someone or pushing someone, because then it may be very uncomfortable and have the opposite effect. So I think, and that's also from a business perspective, right? Then you have to start thinking, how am I going to build my products and in which way so that it can be sustainable? Because the ones that you do one-on-one, they're a different level. It may take longer. It takes longer to show people that this is what they want if they're not aware yet. It takes a lot of time to build that awareness. So there's a lot of things to think about when it comes to coaching, but it is important that the person wants it, right? And that's where the marketing and being able to automate the marketing and all these things help, because that can be the little nudges that get them to make the decision. But at the end, they have to make the decision, and it's what works for them. There's different budgets, there's different things, and yeah, everyone decides what's fit for them. It's their life, right?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Well, Ginnette, I mean, you and I used to see each other at events and through training events when we worked together in the software world at Cisco. And I must say, meeting you today, you just seem so grounded and relaxed and comfortable in your path. I'm sure there's a few butterflies in there as well, but I must say, you seem so comfortable with your choices and where you are and your rationales, and clearly been a great decision for you, is my reflection just talking to you for the last 40 odd minutes.
I've been taking my own medicine.
You mentioned the golf coach. Mike, the record guy, actually wanted to go to art college, but it was just like not in his family's DNA. And I was talking to Artie yesterday about being a single mum and juggling corporate life and going. So there is a real theme to this, in my view, of what this sort of job to journey entrepreneurship path, whether you are a golfer or an engineer trying to become a coach, there are common themes. And I wonder, are there a couple of points that you would recommend or advice you would give to someone who's at that tipping point of thinking, do you know what, I love my job at one level, but maybe I'm looking for something different? Any reflections that you would ask people to think about or give them advice about?
Yeah, I think it's very important to have an honest look at where you are and yourself before you jump into anything, especially if you're letting go of something, right? So it's just, be sure that you have an awareness of what is it that economically you need, and build a buffer before, or maybe start doing it gradually. Because if you're going to do something drastic, I mean, we are in the world that we are on, and it is important to, you have bills, we have things to do. So doing that jump, think through the consequences. And if there are consequences you can live with, then it may be worth the risk, right? But taking that time to reflect on what happens if it doesn't work out. Like, what's my plan B? If you're comfortable with that, like, find a place that you're comfortable, because it's no fun when you're doing it without having at least a sense that there's a plan B or security. Then you're acting from stress and you're acting from frustration, and then it's no fun. And I've been there too. I've done some decisions that have made me realize that I'm not doing this again. And this is one of the reasons why I slowed down, right? I could have done the startup and gone more into it, but while I was in there, I thought, I'm uncomfortable with this level of risk. And so I backed out, and there's no problem backing out. It's not failing. It's not anything. It's always come back to yourself. Is this aligned with who I am? Am I comfortable with this? What do I need to be, what do I need to be calm when I do these steps so they become fun and exciting as opposed to stressful and draining? And I'll leave it with a quote. I think this quote from Maya Angelou summarizes very well. She says, plan for the worst, expect the best, and then you're ready for anything in between. And I think this journey is a little bit like that.
Yeah. Very good. Thanks, Ginnette. So I think you've probably covered it, but from a what next perspective, what does the next few months, 6 months look like for you? Just keep building what you're trying to build, or is that the main focus for the foreseeable future?
Yeah, I've been also going through my roller coaster, even though I seem very grounded on that. I've also been thinking, right? Because it is, when you already have a certain level of knowledge, you can get a job and then suddenly just get paid that, right? When you're building something on your own, it's like, will it come? Will it not come? So there's a part of me that's always like going back to that box and playing with the idea of going back to work, or maybe part-time work, and then seeing this. But I decided to, give it a stop. I'm going to give it a proper try for a while and build something. So right now I'm actually trying to figure out which, or see what comes, right? Like, I'm coaching, I'm starting to get more and more clients, but I also know that I may have to create more programs or packets and this kind of thing. So I'm trying to use what I've learned both at Cisco and during the incubator to make sure you do this with the client, right? Like make sure that there's a market fit before you put a lot of time into what it is. So a lot of time talking to people, finding out if is this something people are willing to pay for, and how much is it they're willing to pay for, and trying to create programs that fit the market, but also that then can give me more clients for the higher offers, like the one-on-one coachings. Because we need to vary, but there is so many people that have done this ahead and so on. So it's also about cutting through the noise. There's lots of models I can follow, but try to find out which is the one that works out for me. And then go back to, adventure is still in me. So we'll see what opportunities come along also as well. But for now, coaching is definitely where I'm focusing my efforts and trying to figure out in which place or what niche I can make the biggest impact.
Great. Well, I'm sold, Ginnette. I'm ready to sign up for some coaching. But if anybody else listening to this podcast is interested, I mean, you've written some really nice articles very recently on LinkedIn, which I really think are really lovely reflections and things to think about. But how should people contact you, and where will they find you? And we'll put this by, of
LinkedIn is
course,
great.
we'll put it all in the description anyway.
Yeah, LinkedIn is great. I will be working on a website and all of that later once I have things a little more defined, but LinkedIn is definitely the gate to get in touch with me. So if they can just send me a DM or connect with me in LinkedIn, that would be great.
Well, Ginnette, thanks so much for your time today. I really enjoyed our conversation. You seem in a really good place, and thanks for being part of the Job to Journey podcast.
Thank you very much, Peter. It was lovely seeing you. Have a wonderful day.
And you.
Okay, bye.